the shooting experience, the act of taking a photo, is as important as the photo to me. Not everyone shares that opinion. Most professional photographers, I would say, view the gear as tools to derive photography. And I think that that's probably not a bad thing. That's probably good. But to me, experiences are as important as the final result. So with that in mind, I don't mind sacrificing a little bit of sensor size to have a better shooting experience. And that is what drew me to the x-t2. So my goal during this holiday season, when I had some time off, has been to figure out how I feel about the a6500, trying to give it as much of a chance as I've given the x-t2 to see if that's a camera I would prefer. As a result of that, I feel like I can now give a pretty qualified review of it and comparison to the x-t2. These are very comparable cameras, and I think it's natural that when folks are looking for a nice camera to buy in that size sensor, this size camera, that they will compare these two cameras. So I'd like to give a little bit of a guide to these two cameras. I do apologize for a little bit of hoarseness in my voice, as well as a little bit of lethargia. I happen to be sick. It wouldn't be Christmas holiday season if I wasn't sick. I think every year this happens. So first off, I want to talk about the price. The x-t2 is more expensive by $200, coming in at $1,600 US, whereas the a6500 is about $1,400 US. $200 more, and the question is, what do you get for that $200? Now, on paper, these two cameras have pretty much the same sensor. We're talking about a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor, advanced hybrid autofocus systems, 4K video capabilities, but the Fuji sensor is a teeny tiny bit larger. $200 worth larger? Nah, probably not. The other difference, though, is that the Fuji uses the X-Trans, which eliminates the need for a low-pass filter inside of the camera. Thus, you get 100% detail. So even when you're scaled at 100%. So that gives you some sharpness that you may not get with the Sony. Also, the Sony does have an anti-aliasing filter, whereas Fuji does not. What that means is you might get some moire. In fact, you do with the Fuji, that you have to take care of in post and in video. There's not much you can do about it. Whereas the Sony, it'll take care of that moire. Moire? I don't know how you say it. I don't know. I'm not a video guy, so they usually worry about that more than us still people do. Anyway, so those are some differences between the sensor, which kind of starts to show who these cameras are made for. If you're more of a video shooter, the Sony tends to have more features that will help you, and the Fuji's a little bit better for stills, in my opinion, and we'll come back to some more reasons why that is. The a6500 has more of a rangefinder design to the body, whereas the x-t2 looks like a traditional SLR. Some people, though, prefer their eye to be, their nose to be off the camera, rangefinder style. So they like that. And it might be better to compare the a6500 directly to the X Pro 2 because their body styles are similar, but I'm not doing that here. Another difference is the weather sealing. While they both have some weather sealing, the x-t2 is designed to include freezing resistance down to 10 below Celsius. The a6500 is only dust proof and moisture proof, or I guess I should say resistant. So there's another difference. If you happen to be an extreme weather type person that likes to spend your time in igloos, Or if you just keep your cameras in the freezer when you're not using them, like me, then maybe you want to use the x-t2. Both cameras have the same ISO range. Now both cameras have an articulating screen which will tilt 45 degrees downward and 90 degrees upward. But only the x-t2 allows you the capability of going horizontally, which I like. Some people don't care. Something to consider. They both have a 230,000 dot electronic viewfinder, so that's similar. The Sony is 50 grams lighter. Sony has a built-in flash, whereas the x-t2 comes with an external flash attachment. Now, I didn't test these flashes. I don't really use on-camera flash, but if it's important to you to always have it with you, that might be a point on the a6500 side. Personally, I like the external attachable that comes with the x-t2. I'm not bogged down with unnecessary features that I don't use. The LCD on the Sony is touch sensitive. It is helpful when changing your focus points, and it appears to me anyway only helpful when you're changing your focus points. For whatever reason, you can't do any of the menuing with the touchscreen, which I thought was weird, but you know, whatever. So the thing that you have to keep in mind during the shooting experience, if you want to change the points, you almost need two hands on the Sony a6500. Whereas with the Fuji, they've got the joystick, and that allows you to change the focus points with your thumb and shoot with one hand. Fuji allows you to change the points, the point sizes. If you need a lot of speed, like in street photography and whatnot, you can go from the 325 points down to the 91 points, and that allows you to get across that screen very quickly. But Sony has a clear advantage when it comes to the phase detection. Sony has 425 phase detection points, 169 contrast detection points, and it covers the surface of the sensor. Whereas the x-t2 only has 325 autofocus points and only 91 phase detection points that only cover the middle 40% of the sensor. The Sony will only shoot 11 frames per second. The Fuji x-t2 will shoot 14 frames per second. Now, the Fuji has some robust software on board for detecting movement in the continuous autofocus, which has gotten rave reviews. But when compared to the focus points that you get with Sony, it's probably, the importance of that is probably mitigated. You're looking at 14 frames per second shooting in JPEG mode. Now keep in mind the buffer doesn't last long enough on the Fuji to really just continuously fire away in RAW. So even though Sony has only 11 frames per second burst, it's actually able to just continually shoot that without having to buffer like you're going to have to with Fuji. So during this shoot, I actually switched to JPEG fine on Fuji just so that I can get the full benefit of the 14 frames per second while I did the continuous autofocus test. And if you look at these files, obviously the ISO is pretty high because it was pretty dark. Also, I think it's important to keep in mind the context of the lenses. I was using a 35mm on both cameras. On the Sony it was 1.8, on the Fuji it was the 2.0. Both cameras do an amazing job. They're pretty incredible. If I were to pick a winner based on this not super scientific process though, I don't know. I mean, as I review these, I can't honestly tell a huge difference. It was super cold, so we didn't stay out there too long doing autofocus continuous burst tests. But from what I can tell, both cameras do a pretty phenomenal job at tracking a subject. So if I had to pick a winner, I don't know. I don't think I can. That wasn't quite scientific enough, but it was enough to show me that both cameras are pretty impressive. The battery life was roughly equivalent. You're going to get around 350 shots with either camera's battery. The The x-t2 does have a higher shutter speed. It will go up to 8,000th of a second, whereas the a6500 only goes up to 4,000. x-t2 also does built-in time-lapse. Another large difference is going to be the difference in shooting these professionally. Would I reach for the a6500 if I was going to a studio shoot or a wedding? Would I reach for any Sony camera for that matter? I would be hesitant because I'm super paranoid. I have lost memory cards before, and I like having a backup. I like that Fuji gives us 2 slots. Sony's still not on the bus when it comes to that. The a6500 is no different. So while I think it's a great camera for a lot of settings, I would not want it in a wedding situation. So let's talk about image stabilization. With the a6500, you have in-body image stabilization. And from the tests I was doing, it's pretty impressive. I did one test just, chasing my son in video mode with no image stabilization on the Fuji, and you can see that it's really, really bumpy. As I turned on the in-lens stabilization, which in this case I had to use my 50 to 140 millimeter lens because it's the only in-lens image stabilization option I have right now on the Fuji line. So you can kind of see how it's stabilized as, again, I chase my son with that. But then we pull out the a6500 with its built-in body image stabilization, and it's pretty impressive. You can see the footage here. I was really, really impressed by it. And someone made the point in my last video that in-lens stabilization is going to be better for you if you've got a long focal range, whereas in-body's going to work better at shorter focal ranges. Now, I haven't been able to test that, but it sounds, in theory, it sounds like it could be true. The last difference that I see, and this is more subjective, I will give you my opinion here. The shooting experience on the a6500 was dismal for me after shooting with the x-t2. I was able to pick up the x-t2 and within just a few minutes feel pretty confident that I was shooting with settings that I liked and that I wanted. I was able to get those settings where I wanted them, change some of the defaults away. I was up and shooting confidently very, very quickly. But the a6500, I went my whole first shoot not having the settings I wanted. And it wasn't until I went home, looked some things up, spent some time with the interface, that I was able to then get it where I needed it to be. Now, that's not the end of the world. And as I mentioned in my last video, anybody's going to be able to get familiar with that interface and be able to shoot confidently with it. But the next evening, when Denae and I went out and did some street photography, I really found myself missing that x-t2. I was struggling a lot with the interface, even after I'd become more familiar with it. And I think the word that I would use is fiddly. Now, trying to be as unbiased as possible, I do feel like the x-t2 is an easier, quicker interface to master and to use in everyday shooting, especially street photography where speed is so vital. It's better than Canon and Nikon. I just don't think anyone has the edge over it from what I can tell. So I've kind of gone over all of the features, maybe not all of them, but the big ones, the big differences that I've found between the x-t2 and the a6500. But I want to end on what I feel is the biggest difference and what I feel like is the deal breaker for the a6500. The reason why I could never purchase it or use it professionally or casually, and that comes down to lenses. As a body, it's phenomenal in most ways. Sure, I don't love the UI, but there's so many great features on it. But outside of the body itself, the lens selection is dismal. Now, if you consult online websites that compare these, they will disagree with me. They will say that there are roughly 58 lenses out there, common lenses, that can be mounted on the a6500. And while that is true, keep in mind that only 9 or 10 of those are E-mount lenses. Why is that a problem? Well, when it comes to FE mount lenses, that's Sony's full frame lenses, when you mount those on an E mount crop body like the a6500, you're going to lose more than just the benefits of the size of the camera. You're also going to lose out on quality of those lenses. You're going to be paying a lot more money for less quality than you would get with an E-mount. The reason for that is that full frame lenses on crop bodies create softness and decrease quality, even more so than lower quality crop lenses that were built for crop cameras at a cheaper cost and cheaper build quality. So I don't feel like you can take those 40 to 50 FE mount lenses and can compare them to the Fuji lenses, because those Fuji lenses are superior for crop cameras in about every way you can imagine. They're incredible lenses, and the E-mount lenses are not. They're probably okay, and there's not very many of them, maybe 9, that are directly built for a crop camera. So for instance, if we get on DXO Mark and we pull up our a65 1.8 FE mount Sony lens, a great portrait lens, works and looks phenomenal on the A7R2, we're going to get 35 megapixels worth of perceived sharpness. Again, according to the tests that DXO Mark conducts. But when we stick this on, and now they don't have a6500 in here yet, I'm sure they haven't had time to really test that, but if we pull this up on another crop camera, the a6000, this is a 24 megapixel sensor. What we find is that we're getting 14 perceived megapixels. Even though we're cropping at a factor of 1.5, we're losing more than half of the quality out of that lens. It's not proportional, and it's a waste of money. It's a waste of weight. I mean, this is a $1,200 lens. So let's pull up a more affordable lens. Let's pull up a lens that was built for the E-mount, and that would be another great portrait lens. It's the Sony E 50mm 1.8. Now, this lens is $300, and its build quality is cheaper. It's way lighter. It's not the best lens in the world, let's be honest. But when put on that same camera body, according to the DXO Mark, the a6000 has 13 perceptual megapixels, one less megapixel than the Batis 85mm. You're roughly getting the same image quality out of either lens, and you're spending a fourth the price. You're also saving your wrists, you're saving a lot of weight, a lot of profile. Anyway, now if you're a full frame Sony shooter and you're looking at the a6500 as an alternative in certain settings where you want something small and light, it probably makes perfect sense to go with it. But in any other case, if you are looking for a camera that will get you professional results, you're willing to do a crop body, or you're looking for one specifically to save money or to save size, this to me is the deal breaker, and this is why I cannot recommend the a6500. So in summary, if you're already a Sony full frame shooter, or if you shoot a lot of video, I would consider the a6500. It's probably an awesome option. But if you're a stills photographer looking for a crop body to be your primary camera, I would say x-t2 wins, and that would be the one I would recommend hands down. So that's all. That's my I'm exhausted. I did this video on like one day. I gotta take advantage of my days off, and this has been, on top of just being sick, this has been a lot of work. In conclusion, these are just my opinions. The opinions of some dude who spent a few days researching these things, who is not an expert, but just happens to have a YouTube channel. You know, these are just my opinions, and you should form your own. You should do your own research. Be your own person. I'm anxious to hear your comments. Am I really anxious? I don't know, because some people take this stuff like it's religion. And if they've already bought the a6500 and now I'm telling them that they made a poor choice, get religious about like other things, like maybe religion or politics. But camera stuff, you know, just relax. It'll be okay. If you already purchased the a6500 and now you're questioning that decision, or you're mad because I'm questioning your decision, don't take it personally. I think you're a lovely person. But anyway, have a happy holiday, or, you know, if you're watching this in June, have a great time at the beach. And until next time, I hope to have you watch me later. That sounded creepy.